This is New Time on Silkway TV channel. We introduce you with the most visible news and important events that happen throughout this week in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. More details on politics, economy, social and cultural life with opinions from the most recognizable experts of Kazakhstan and the world. I'm Ainur Mangali. Let us begin. President Tokayev welcomed the beginning of the dialogue on the possible peacemaking deal on the Ukrainian crisis, highlighting the importance of diplomatic efforts in finding solutions. Trade wars and their implications on the global economy. Will it open the window of opportunities for developing nations? China's ambitions in AI and airspace, who will dominate the most competitive fields in the years to come. New Times' Balzhan Samigulina interviewed analysts. President Tokayev reaffirmed Kazakhstan's diplomatic anti-war stance on the Ukrainian crisis. The head of state commented regarding the possible peacemaking deal during a recent event in Astana, which was dedicated to the Year of Labor Professions in the country. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev welcomed the beginning of the dialogue between world's major powers on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, highlighting the crucial importance of stability that is the cornerstone of Kazakhstan's national idea.
There's a lot of talk about Ukraine right now. From the very beginning, we have advocated for the cessation of the war, for reaching an agreement through diplomatic negotiations. Our position is becoming a reality, as two major powers have begun political dialogue. This is a positive trend, and it will benefit Kazakhstan as well. Therefore, we will support this trend as much as possible.
The cessation of the war in Ukraine will be one of the central topics of the Security Conference, which has already begun in German Munich city. On the eve of the conference, US President Donald Trump announced that on the very first day there would be contacts between Russian and American representatives, as well as negotiations between Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and US Vice President J.D. Vance. Notably, 2 days ahead of the conference, Trump held phone talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. The US President, right after the call, announced that he did not rule out that his negotiations with Vladimir Putin could possibly take place in Saudi Arabia. Last week, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev met with business leaders to discuss Kazakhstan's economy. He said the situation is stable, but stressed that the government must stay alert. The head of state pointed out that international financial organizations view the country's public debt as low and manageable. However, the IMF warns that falling oil prices, tighter financial conditions and tax reforms could slow GDP growth over the next year. What do experts predict for Kazakhstan's economy? More details in our next report.
President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev confidently stated that Kazakhstan's financial stability is backed by strong credit ratings with a stable outlook from leading rating agencies. However, he emphasized that the government must continue seeking new opportunities for economic growth.
We must not relax under any circumstances. Yes, the economy is growing at 4.8%, but as I mentioned at the government meeting, this is not enough for Kazakhstan.
The government bases its economic forecast on the National Development Plan, which aims to double GDP by 2029. But international organizations, including the IMF, have a more cautious outlook. The IMF forecasts that after 2025, economic growth will slow to 3.5%, driven by low productivity and declining investment. This underscores the need for economic diversification and new sources of growth.
On this year, if you just look on official forecast of government, they based on main drivers is transport, construction, and services. And of course, it's maybe how to say what is expected before. This is new. It's start launching project of Tengiz, PBR. It's PBR project, and they expected on this year increasing of oil production this year 95, 97 million ton per year. You know, in previous year it was about 90, it was 89 million ton. That's why expected this is higher level of oil production.
Therefore, in 2025, Kazakhstan's economic growth will be influenced, among other factors, by the expected increase in oil production. However, economist Janibek Aygazin warns that external factors could also contribute to a slowdown in the country's economic growth.
This projection and forecasting of government, they made in very aggressive environment. Just it's external environmental and internal environment. I don't like indeed. It's of course it's uncertain the global economy due to new candidacy of Trump. This is any like trade war with China, with Mexico, with Canada, treatment with European Union, and it's of course it will influence all global economy.
With monthly inflation hitting 11-month high at 1.1% in January 2025, concerns about future inflation have grown. The 12-month inflation forecast has now climbed to 10.6%.
I think this is main agenda on this year for Kazakhstan government. For Kazakhstan, it will be inflation. Because if you just looking on past 3 months, our inflation is actually accelerated. For January, compare with December previous year, our CPI of goods, it's food. I mean, this is goods. It's increasing 1.5%. It's actually it should be under attention of government. I mean, this is policymakers. That's why I think its main agenda will be inflation.
Rising inflation is also expected due to the upcoming tax reforms. Speaking to business leaders, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev acknowledged that the government's earlier proposal to raise the VAT rate to 20% sparked strong public backlash.
The VAT rate should be differentiated. The decision on its upper threshold must be based on precise calculations and take into account the opinions of qualified experts, entrepreneurs, and of course parliament members. One thing is clear, the government's proposed rate was too high.
Experts agree that Kazakhstan's economic outlook for 2025 remains uncertain. While GDP growth is possible, risks related to inflation, tax burdens and external instability pose significant challenges. A key factor will be how effective the tax reform turns out to be. The government now proposes setting the VAT rate at 16%. Daurin Sagulov, New Time.
Businessmen and the government should work closely to make the tax reform happen. This thought was shared by Zhumabek Zhanikulov, the co-owner of Taras Metallurgical Plant and also the chairman of the Presidium of National Confederation of Employers, Paris. The businessman has initiated his own proposals for the development of SMEs in the country. He was one of the participants of the meeting with captains of business which President Tokayev held earlier this month. We asked Mr. Zhanikulov about the key topics that are discussed now in the country, including tax reform and economic development. Please watch the fragment of the interview right now. Позвольте спросить вас о вопросе привлечения инвестиций.
Let me ask you about attracting investments. You have already mentioned that your enterprises have been implemented with the help of foreign direct investment. If we talk about this issue, what changes in legislation do you think are necessary, first of all, to make the investment process as convenient as possible?
For any businessman, let him be foreign or Kazakh, we need clear, comprehensible rules of the game. This is a capital-raising policy, and it should be stable.
Predictable.
Yes, and that's the first reason. The second is the scale. That is our market, how scalable it is, how transparent it is, and how flexibly it can work with other countries. For example, there are relations with China, but it is very difficult to transport a product and sell it in China. The state should be more actively involved here. These are tasks for the government. For any businessman, foreign or local, the scalability of projects is a very important issue. And thirdly, There is such a thing as business diplomacy. Businessmen of both middle and senior management travel a lot around the world and communicate with different people at conferences, exhibitions, meetings. And they talk about what is happening in our country. And this is very important. Investors and partners need real cases, real business stories on how to invest in Kazakhstan. For instance, I always tell young businessmen, if you travel abroad, even if you're on vacation, attend conferences and exhibitions, go and see global scientific achievements. You will see the picture of what is happening, and of course, you will be able to establish business contacts. And also, very ergonomic, efficient work should be built at the embassy level, the purpose of which is to constantly talk about Kazakhstan.
I want to ask about taxes as well. This topic now is actively discussed in Kazakhstan. The government still suggests raising the rate of the VAT, but at the same time making it differentiated. That is, we can say individual for enterprises of different industries. For example, it's proposed for agricultural producers to be completely exempt from taxes. What do you think about this?
Дифференцированный налог я за.
I'm in favor of a differentiated tax, but it will be followed by administration, that is, government agencies must administer it correctly, and enterprises themselves must be ready for it. And then you should understand that one industry always depends on other. It's all interconnected. The same agricultural producers can buy any services from companies that pay VAT. The issue of administration arises again. In general, I think that rising rates is not a tax reform. To implement the reform, it is necessary to clearly understand from whom, when, why to borrow money, and how and where to invest it later, and what to spend it on. This is very important, because in economics there is such a concept when there happen to be such quick results, which is money to money. This means that money should work for the economy, since our country is socially oriented. The state has many obligations, which is understandable, but at the same time, these taxes that the state wants to collect and release again, without giving the opportunity to work for the economy, then this very economy will not work. Accordingly, a thorough tax reform is needed. I talked to many experts, and it turns out that everywhere we come across different introductory data, that is, different calculations and figures that are being used. Therefore, I think it would be advisable to select 15, 20 or 30 experts, businessmen of different profiles, and bring them together with government agencies in order to develop a unified tax reform that is understandable to all. We need to discuss this topic in more depth, and it shouldn't just be about raising the stakes. Bottom line, businessmen should still be motivated to do business. And for this, as I have already said, we need trust and clear rules of the game. In other words, there should be an honest dialogue between business and the state, and such dialogue will certainly yield results.
Meanwhile, the Kazakh government has clarified its proposed changes to the value-added tax rate. The Ministry of National Economy has set the base rate at 16% with sector-specific adjustments. Agricultural producers are expected to be fully exempt, while healthcare businesses may receive a reduced 10% rate. According to preliminary estimates, these changes could bring an additional $8 to $10 billion to the state budget each year. The Minister of National Economy explained that the decision to limit differentiation to 16% and 10% was driven by administrative efficiency.
На кого она еще будет распространена? Этот вопрос.
Who else will be affected? This question requires further discussion. We will gather all proposals, run the numbers, and make decision together with experts and businesses. Why only 10%? Because of administrative complexity. First, for businesses. Second, for tax authorities. Too many rates complicate accounting, tax declarations, and increase debit balances. To avoid this, we propose 16, 10, and 0% and full exemptions.
The minister admitted that higher tax rates could lead to inflation, estimating an increase of up to 3%. The government has been considering changes to the tax code since 2022. In September 2023, it proposed raising VAT to 16%, but President Tokayev rejected the idea in early 2024 concerning inflation and a rise in the shadow economy. The latest proposal will be discussed with businesses before being submitted to Parliament by the end of February. Prime Minister of Kazakhstan Olraz Bektenov called for increased efforts to attract private investment, particularly in infrastructure, industry, transportation, digitalization and artificial intelligence. He also stressed the need for strict oversight to ensure timely project completion and maximum efficiency. Notably, this week he accepted chairman of the national company Samruk Kazina, Nurlan Zhakupov, who is in charge of overseeing 46 major projects valued at over $65 billion. These initiatives span a variety of sectors, including oil and gas, petrochemicals, energy, transportation and logistics, particularly the implementation of the Middle Corridor. The meeting allowed the officials to review the company's future direction, with a focus on the goals set by the President Tokayev at a recent government session.
I'm concerned about a number of projects that are currently underway. Specifically, these include the construction of the second line of the Baineo-Baizhou-Shymkent gas pipeline, 2 gas processing plants at Kashagan and Zhanaozen, and plants for polyethylene and butadiene production. In my view, there are delays with the projects I've mentioned. We must ensure the timely commissioning of all these projects. I have visited most of these sites and seen the situation firsthand, so it's important that we address this issue in a concrete and focused manner.
In a recent phone call, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and European Council President Antonio Costa discussed the future of cooperation between Kazakhstan and the EU. The two leaders highlighted the positive dynamics in their relationship, emphasizing key areas for growth, including trade, investments, energy, transportation and digital transformation. The parties, as reported by the Akorda press service, expressed their commitment to further dialogue and practical collaboration on a broad range of issues, both bilateral and regional. President Tokayev also extended an invitation to President Costa to visit Kazakhstan. Notably, this conversation was initiated by European side. Kazakhstan pursues its own policy without looking back at others, said President Tokayev during an awards ceremony for Special Forces Officers Prize winners of the UAE SWAT Challenge tournament in Dubai, where the Kazakh team secured second place. The head of state congratulated the winners and highlighted the role of special forces in strengthening national security. The president noted that today some countries, including major powers, are drastically reassessing their approaches to foreign and domestic policy. In contrast, Kazakhstan remains committed to political pragmatism.
We have always emphasized the importance of upholding law and order. Time has proven the correctness of our principles and strategic course. That is why we will continue to firmly defend our national interests. We are committed to our values and pursue our policy without looking back at others. Our goal is clear: to build a strong and prosperous Kazakhstan.
The US-China trade war could work in Kazakhstan's favor by strengthening its position as a transit hub, according to Arman Beysimbayev, an expert from an international brokerage group. He said that under tariff pressure, China will increasingly rely on land-based transit routes, which could lead to an additional influx of investments in the long run. However, this scenario also has its downsides, the expert warned. Who stands to benefit from the latest escalation of trade tensions between the world's two largest economies, and what risks does Kazakhstan face? Find out more in our next report.
As soon as he took office, President Donald Trump resumed what he had started back in 2016, during his first term, the revival of so-called trade wars. Trump signed an executive order imposing an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods, on top of the existing duties on Chinese imports. Additionally, a 25% tariff was imposed on goods from Canada and Mexico, as well as on all steel and aluminum imports to the United States. Why? Import tariffs are a cornerstone of Trump's economic vision, experts say. He sees them as a means to drive US economic growth, protect domestic jobs and boost government revenues. However, some analysts argue that the decision to weaponize trade through tariffs will ultimately weaken rather than strengthen the country's influence in the global economy.
The overall effect of this will actually be, in my humble opinion, to reduce the weight and importance of the United States in the world economy, because no country can deal with such an unreliable trading partner and economic partner. And more, he's creating real incentives for the rest of the world to find alternatives to being economically connected with the United States in every possible way.
China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also emphasized that there would be no winners in the tariff war between Beijing and Washington. In response, China imposed a 10% tariff on imports of oil and agricultural machinery, as well as a 15% tariff on coal and liquefied natural gas from the United States. However, experts note that Beijing is treading carefully, aiming to avoid further escalation.
China did retaliate with 10 to 15% tariffs on things such as machinery, LNG and oil. They also restricted more rare earths such as tungsten, which is used in X-rays and light bulbs. One of the things that we did not see, though, is a broadside against all U.S. products. China was very selective. We interpret this as China's leaving room for negotiation and also doesn't want to overreact to a 10% tariff by the U.S.
Additionally, Beijing filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization against the US, arguing that such measures violate international trade rules and disrupt global supply chains. However, the White House remains resolute and has reacted calmly to China's countermeasures. Furthermore, Trump warned that he could impose additional tariffs on imports of pharmaceuticals and computer chips in the future.
Mr. President, what's your reaction to China's retaliatory tariffs?
It's fine. It's fine. We're going to do very well against China and against everybody else. Right now, they've taken advantage of the Biden administration like I've never seen. I've never seen. The deficit with China is about $1 trillion. Think of it, $1 trillion.
China's massive trade deficit with the US, which reached nearly $1 trillion last year, has long been a target of Donald Trump's complaints. Tariffs will make Chinese goods more expensive for American consumers, potentially harming China's crucial export market if US buyers opt to buy American. This is why the trade war does not favor China, argues financial analyst Arman Besimbayev. China's export-dependent economy will be forced to restructure its trade chains. However, a key beneficiary of this shift could be one of China's neighbors and important trade partner, Kazakhstan.
On one hand, there is an interesting point to consider. China will likely focus more on the land-based transit routes. In this regard, Kazakhstan as a transit country stands to benefit. This is advantageous because it will necessitate the development of infrastructure to accommodate these routes. Around major transit corridors such as the much-discussed New Silk Road, entire cities often emerge, bringing an additional influx of investments. China may well lose access to the US market. In fact, it is highly likely, but it is determined not to lose the European market. The key to maintaining that access lies in the Belt and Road Initiative, which is currently being actively developed to ensure China's continued presence in Europe.
Even in this scenario, the experts see some of the downside effects for Kazakhstan as well. The country's status as a transit hub can harm local production as the market becomes flooded with goods passing through. Additionally, the stagnation of China's economy in recent years will also play a role.
China will have to endure a painful crisis, one that is already unfolding in various sectors. As the world's largest oil consumer, China's economic downturn poses significant risks. If a crisis hits, its oil consumption will decline, leading to a drop in global oil prices. This aligns with Trump's promise to lower oil prices by pressuring China and triggering an economic slowdown. Demand for oil decreases, with supply outpacing demand and oversupply emerges, ultimately driving oil prices down.
China is the third largest trading partner of the United States, accounting for 11.3% of total US foreign trade as of last December. This underscores the deep economic interdependence between the two countries, despite their ideological rivalry. While analysts continue to debate who is winning this trade war, one clear loser has already emerged: the stable and predictable growth of the global economy. Daurian Sagulov, New Time.
The EU is determined to avoid dependence on US and Chinese AI technology. But unless the world's leading economies accelerate investment and innovation, they risk being left behind in a contest that is rapidly reshaping the global approaches in the field. For now, Silicon Valley's and Chinese tech firms dominate the industry. So who is likely to lead the AI race in the coming years? Baltran Samigulina talked to analysts.
France is the top destination for foreign investment into AI in Europe, but competition is fierce. The US and China in particular have a strong lead over European firms. Analysts say the EU needs to increase investment and change the narrative to stay competitive. To say ChatGPT of parent OpenAI is valued at $340 billion, while France's Mistral AI is valued at $6. The challenge for the EU government is to catch up with the US and China in the AI race, and also convince their citizens that AI doesn't have to be scary but can actually change their lives for the better. France President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission's President Ursula von der Leyen seems to determined to break this fear.
Too often, I hear that Europe is late to the race, while the United States or China have already gotten ahead. I disagree, because the AI race is far from being over.
We announced this morning 200 billion euros in European investment, 50 million from the Commission and 150 billion euros from big European companies that we mobilized yesterday at the LSE. And there too we are coming back in the race and we are speeding up.
Up to now, the AI landscape has been dominated by the US, with the big tech companies like Microsoft, Nvidia, Google, Meta, and firms like OpenAI and Anthropic. But China has been hot on its heels. In January, Chinese AI chatbot DeepSeek burst onto the scene, creating waves all over the world, not least because it appeared to be able to outperform other AI platforms at a fraction of the cost. The timing was a blow for Washington, D.C., just a week after US President Donald Trump unveiled a $500 billion AI infrastructure plan in America.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser-focused on competing to win.
Chinese AI firms now issue more patents than any other country, and the rise of DeepSeek shows it's capable of challenging the dominant US giants with products too.
The cost of the DeepSeek big model's training and reasoning has been greatly reduced. It only costs $0.11 to input 1.5 million words. On the first day of DeepSeek's launch, 15,000 new users came to use it, which is a staggering number.
The rise of Chinese AI chatbot DeepSeek has taken the world by storm, but is part of a wider trend. Chinese apps are rising up the charts around the world. TikTok, CapCut, Xi'an, Timo, to name a few. And it's not just on our phones. China is becoming dominant in many other areas of tech. In electric cars and drones, for example, China rules these keys too, as noticed by Blaine Curcio, expert in the intersection of China and cutting-edge technology.
I just saw a couple of days ago the company BYD, they're releasing an electric vehicle. All of their electric vehicles will soon have a kind of self-driving software. And it's not just BYD. There's a lot of companies in China building very impressive electric vehicles. And if you go to places like Thailand or Mexico or maybe Kazakhstan, I've never been there, but there's a lot of Chinese electric vehicles in some of these countries.
A lot of this success comes from the China being the world's biggest battery maker now too, and solar plants of China is responsible for an estimated 80 to 95% of the global supply chain. By 2028, it's predicted that 60% of the world's renewable energy will be generated in China. Notably, these advancements were driven within a long-term plan. 10 years ago, the Chinese government set out an ambitious project called Made in China 2025. It wanted to move away from being the world's factory for low-cost goods to a global tech leader responsible for its own supply chain of cutting-edge tech. In space industries, China has made progress as well, with SpaceSail, a rival to Elon Musk's Starlink, registered at Astana International Financial Center. However, with multiple number of space companies operating in China, there might be an oversupply of rockets, which can lead to the export of these goods to other countries.
Like with electric cars, where we've seen China exporting electric cars at very competitive prices, we may see eventually China export rocket launch services at very competitive prices because they might have too many rockets or satellites or satellite propulsion systems or whatever else we want to talk about. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of factories being built in China for space-related things.
But China hasn't succeeded in all its 2025 goals. It's still years behind other countries in chip making, with progress set to get even worse thanks to more sanctions and controls. Plus, the US government and private firms are investing much funds into staying ahead in technologies. This increased research and development funding is going to ensure that the United States and China lead the world in the industries of the future. Balzhan Samigulina, New Time.
The Artificial Intelligence Action Summit held this week in Paris. It was a 5-day gathering of political leaders, tech executives, scientists and experts from over 90 countries coming to the French capital to discuss the future of AI. Summit hosted France as the country wanted to be a global leader in this field. Turning to a history of this direction, back in 2018, President Emmanuel Macron launched a national strategy to mobilize 2.5 billion euros in public and private funds to develop homegrown applications. The country now counts roughly 1,000 AI startups. That's double what it had just 4 years ago.
We believe in innovation. We want more innovation here in France and in Europe. We want to speed up, but we also want to promote the values of the society in which we believe through this innovation. A plural model, open, generous, free, equitable, which takes into consideration the questions of climate and gender equality. That's what we believe in. That's what you're fighting for. And so we will continue giving you all the means to speed up, go faster, be in the running, and especially have as much ambition as possible.
While previous summits have been heavy on the risk factors, this time in Paris, opportunities were front and center. The main outcome became a joint declaration on sustainable AI signed by over 60 countries, including Kazakhstan, but excluding the UK and the US. Ambassador of France to Kazakhstan, in a commentary to New Times, said that the official Paris has already attracted investments for this sector, which are needed to change the narrative to stay competitive.
Well, France announced that about 109 billions of euro of investments were announced during this summit. So this will be investments in infrastructures, in data, in energy, and so on. And also the European Union announced that it wants to invest 200 billions of euros in artificial intelligence. And other countries also announced investments. So it showed that with rules of the game, with enhanced and improved governance, about 90 countries from all over the world want to accompany the revolution of the artificial intelligence.
And finally, to the closing and victories news. Kazakhstan wrapped up the final day of the Asian Winter Games in Harbin, China, with 2 more medals. The men's hockey team secured a gold medal after a 5-0 victory over Japan, while the women's team dominated South Korea with another shutout win. Meanwhile, figure skater Mikhail Shaidorov earned a bronze medal, securing 3rd place in the men's competition. Some athletes are already returning to Kazakhstan, including freestyle acrobats Roman Ivanov and Sherzod Ashurbayev, who won gold in the synchronized jumps at the Asian Games. They finished with scores of 97.92 points, surpassing 2 Chinese pairs.
The competition was tough. China is a leader in this sport, and among their team was an Olympic champion. It was an honor to compete against him, challenge him, and win the gold in synchronized jumps.
In total, Kazakhstan finished 4th in the overall medal standings, collecting a total of 20 medals: 4 gold, 9 silver and 7 bronze. And that's it for today. All the main news about Kazakhstan and Central Asia you can find here. More special projects about our country you can also watch on Silkway TV channel. So stay tuned and see you next week.